Good morning. Today is Wednesday, March 26, 2025. This Shabbos, we have a special Torah reading in the synagogue. It is the fourth of four special readings, two of them before Purim, two of them after Purim, and the fourth is the Parshas HaChodesh. It is the portion that introduces the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. It starts with the words, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chodeshim. It's from the Parsha of Bo. This month shall be for you the beginning of the months. So we always read this portion either on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of the month of Nisan, in which Pesach occurs on the 15th, or the Shabbos before. So this year, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of the month of Nisan, is this coming Sunday. So the day before, we're reading this portion, and it refers to Nisan as a month of redemption. It is the month of the redemption, the exodus from Egypt, and hopefully it will be the month of redemption of the Jewish people again. And so we read this portion this coming Shabbos. So we read it in honor of Pesach, which falls during this month, of course, the 15th of the month of Nisan, and this command that God gives is given to the Jewish people while they are still in Egypt on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's the date of this commandment. And this commandment is a shift from a lunar calendar from a solar calendar to a lunar calendar. And this shift to the lunar calendar, to following the cycles of the moon, is in fact the beginning of the Exodus, which is finally actualized on the 15th of this month with the actual Exodus of Pesach. So what I'd like to share with you is going to be in two parts. So part one today is going to be a little bit technical. Part two, which I hope will be tomorrow, is magnificent. So I ask you for your patience and indulgence for the technical part, because we need the technical part to get to the truly magnificent part. So let's turn first to the mechanics of how the lunar month works. Now, we've discussed this before in different contexts, but I don't think we've covered this aspect of it. So we're first going to understand how the lunar month works, and then, hopefully tomorrow, we're going to explore why it is so crucial for our lives as Jews in general, and how it relates to Pesach, how it begins the redemption in particular. That we will look at tomorrow. So let's start with the molad. The word molad, which we will announce this Shabbos as part of the Birchas HaChodesh. So always the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, we have a Birchas HaChodesh, a blessing for the new month, where we ask Hashem for what we want in the coming month. And certainly this month, like all months, but this month, we have a lot to ask for. And that's the Birchas HaChodesh. And part of that is we announce the molad. And the molad that we will announce in shul, in every single shul in the world, the molad is Saturday morning, Shabbos morning, 7:46 a.m. plus one chelek. A chelek is a 1/3 of a second. So 7:46 and a third of a second. And that is Jerusalem local standard time. Now, every month, I always explain what the molad is. The translation of the word molad is birth or rebirth. And I usually say this is the actual beginning of the new lunar cycle. So that's what I say, because that's the common, easy way to understand it, but it's not completely precise. And I want to be precise with you this morning. Because the question is, if it's the actual beginning of the new lunar cycle, how can the molad be Saturday morning and Rosh Chodesh be Sunday? Rosh Chodesh is the beginning of the lunar month. How can they be on different days? And they're often on different days. How can it be if the Molad is the beginning of the new lunar cycle? So let's ask this question. What is the Molad? And why is it not the same as Rosh Chodesh? So the answer is as follows. We know the moon rotates around the earth, and we know the moon and the earth rotate around the sun. So because of all this movement, every day, different parts of the moon are visible on Earth. And what is visible on Earth, of course, the moon doesn't get bigger or smaller. The moon doesn't disappear. It's always there. It's always the same size. But what is visible on Earth changes from day to day, and it changes in a predictable order, progression. So there's a full moon when we see the full circle of the moon, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it disappears. It's not visible in the sky. And then it reappears, and we call that a new moon when it's just a very, very thin crescent. And then it gets bigger and bigger, and we call that a full moon. And that cycle recurs every month. Now, when the moon disappears from view, we call this conjunction. It disappears because it's the way the earth and sun and moon are aligned, there is no illumination of the moon at that moment. So we call that conjunction. The Hebrew word for that is kibbutz. Kibbutz is the moment when the moon is invisible to us, and that's the moment that the cycle begins again. It's invisible, and then it starts to become visible slowly, slowly each day, one after the other. And from conjunction to conjunction is a lunar month. That's what a lunar month is. It's from the moment of conjunction, kibbutz, to the next moment of conjunction. That is a lunar month. Now, the problem with following this for a calendar is that it's not the same every month, because the actual cycle of the moon from kibbutz to kibbutz, from conjunction to conjunction, it varies. It's not always the same speed. It can actually vary up to 12 hours from one month to another. Now, this was known by our rabbis in the Talmud. So, you can either determine Rosh Chodesh visually by eyewitnesses who see the new moon in the sky, and that's what was done in former times. When the Beit HaMikdash was standing and there was a Sanhedrin, and witnesses would come and they say, last night we saw the new moon in the sky. So, of course, that is a later point in the cycle. Or what you could do is you could calculate the average length of the of a lunar month from kibbutz to kibbutz, take the average and use that. And that is what we have done for the last 1600 years. And that is the molad. So the molad is not literally when the moon appears, but it is literally the beginning of the cycle based on the average. Now, the Talmud says that the average length of a lunar cycle is 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 3.3 seconds. Scientists today, by the way, calculated as 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 2.9 seconds. Okay, so it's pretty amazing that scientists today calculate something that our rabbis in the Talmud knew with only a difference of 4/10 of a second. But keep in mind, the scientists of today are only using averages over the last 150 years. So it could be if a few more centuries go by, so the more years you have, the more numbers are in the average, it could be that they will end up with the same number that we have. In any event, so what is the relationship between the Molad and Rosh Chodesh? Remember, at the moment of the kibbutz, the conjunction, or the molad, which is the average time of the kibbutz, the moon is invisible. The sun, the moon, the earth are in conjunction. So the new moon can only be seen later. Now, when the new moon is first visible, that is called a young moon or phasis. So the first time we can see the new moon is phasis, the time of phasis, which is a certain amount of time after the actual molad or kibbutz, the actual beginning of the cycle, which is invisible. And this is going to help us understand a pasuk in this week's Torah portion. In the special parsha that we read, Parsha Chodesh, it begins as follows. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe vel Aaron beretz Mitzrayim lemor. God said to Moshe and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, we're going to go back over this verse tomorrow and point out some very important implications of each of these words, but I'm going to gloss over that today just to get to the point that I want to make for today. HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim. This month should be for you the beginning of the months. I want you, Hashem says, to start to observe a lunar calendar. And the first month is this month, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of the month of Nisan. So the words that the Torah use are HaChodesh hazeh, this month. Now, I've shared with you before, we discussed this in several different contexts. Whenever the Torah uses the word hazeh, this, or zos, another form of the word, it means you could point to it. Zeh, like zeh keli v'amveu, or zos haTorah, we've given other examples, you could point to it. So Rashi says, quoting our earlier rabbis, Hereu levana b'chidusha v'amalo, God showed Moshe the new moon and said to him, Kishayerach mischadesh yiyeh lecha rosh chodesh. When the moon is new, it starts its new cycle, that will be for you Rosh Chodesh. And the Torah says, HaChodesh hazeh, this month. Why does it say hazeh, as if you could point to it? So Rashi explains. Niskasha Moshe al molad halavana. Moshe was unclear. He did not completely understand when is the beginning of the lunar cycle. He didn't get it. So God, so to speak, pointed and said, you see this now? This is it. This is how you'll know that's the new moon. And the new lunar cycle has started. V'amalo kazera, God, as so to speak, points with his finger and says, when you see this in the sky, then you know it's Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so 2 questions. Why was Moshe in this kasha? What was Moshe unclear about? And what did Moshe see? What did God show Moshe? Well, God did not show Moshe the kibbutz, which is the actual conjunction, because at that moment the moon is invisible to us on earth. Certainly he did not show Moshe the molad, because the molad is the average length of the lunar cycle, which by that point there had been no average. It was the first time. What God showed Moshe was phasis. Phasis is the first moment that the new moon becomes visible. Now, in former times, when Each month, witnesses would come to the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, and they would testify that last night we saw the new moon. They were testifying to faces, right? Because they were testifying to something that was visible. So Rosh Chodesh follows faces when the new month becomes visible, which is sometime later than kibbutz, the actual literal beginning of the lunar cycle, which is invisible. That's why it's common that Rosh Chodesh is one day or even 2 days after the kibbutz. So while the kibbutz, and for us the molad, which is the average, is a guideline to when Rosh Chodesh is, it does not determine Rosh Chodesh, because Rosh Chodesh is closer aligned with faces when the new month is visible rather than the actual beginning of the new lunar cycle, which is kibbutz or molad. Now, I realize that's a bit technical, but let me just finish for today with this. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aaron beretz Mitzrayim lemar. Hashem said to Moshe and to Aaron in the land of Egypt as follows, and it's very significant that this command of adopting the lunar calendar is given to the Jewish people while they are still slaves in Egypt. This is the first mitzvah that is given to the entire Jewish people through Moshe, and it is given to them while they are still slaves in Egypt. HaChodesh hazeh lochem. This month shall be for you. For you means it's up to you to determine. The establishment of what day is Rosh Chodesh is not determined by God. It's not determined by the actual phenomenon of where the moon is. It's determined by when the Sanhedrin decides that Rosh Chodesh should be, which is often a day or even 2 days later than the actual kibbutz, the actual conjunction. And this idea that the determination of Rosh Chodesh is not an objective determination, but it is a determination of the Jewish people through the Sanhedrin, will be a major factor in understanding the significance of this mitzvah, how it relates to redemption, how it relates to our lives, and that I hope to show you tomorrow. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.